So we're holding Pei Gimel on the Aleph right at the top. Rabba Moisif Af Rabbi Yossi Aglili. If you look at the bottom on Amid Beis, Rashi says the Rabba adds on Rabbi Yossi Aglili Nami Svir like Aryai Ben Baruka the Psul Bailim Loy Bayi Ibitzura. So if something happens to Kachim, so there is Tisarev Miyat they hold. You don't have to wait for Ibur Tzura. If the psul happens, you don't have to wait for Ibur Tzura, which means that the meat gets spoiled and totally gone. Then you burn it. You could do Tisarev Miyat. So we're saying even the psul is in the bailim and they can use this carbon. So also the din is Tisarev Miyat, and even Rabbi Yossi Aglili holds this din. Where do you see that from? Tanya. We learned the Brisa. Rabbi Yossi Aglili Aimer Kol Einyin Kula. So this brisa, the Chachamim hold before Rabbi Yossi Aglili hold that when the Torah says that you burn the chatas, it's talking about a chatas achitzoyne, the outer chatat that you brought its blood inside, so it becomes pasul because you brought the blood inside, and the Torah says tisarev. Rabbi Yossi Aglili says no. The pasuk is not talking about the outer chatas; it's talking about the chatas apnimius, that the inner chatas psul happened to it. Normally, the avodah by chatas apnimius is that you are put the stuff on the mizbeach, and the rest you burn. It says, right? You put the dam on the mizbeach, and the rest you take it out into Yerushalayim and you burn it, right? But here, this chatas apnimius was a psul. There was a psul to it. So what do you do? So Rabbi Yossi Aglili says that this pasuk is talking that you burn that chatas apnimius, since it's pasul, inside Lifnei Habira. It's talking about Beparim on Israfim, Uvesir on Israfim, Listraif Psuleim. If they become pasul, this chatas apnimius that becomes pasul, you burn it up Beis Habira. In other words, you don't take it out chutz legimel machnos, which is if that's the normal way of the chatas apnimius. If you did it the right way and there's no psul, then you would put the blood on them. You'll be zarek the dam, and then you burn it outside chutz legimel machnos. But since there was a psul in this chatas apnimius, so therefore you burn it on the Beis Habira. Inside, and then the Torah says, "Lo socha litin lo yisas al chilasan." Rabbi Yossi Aglili is arguing with the Chachamim with that brisa and saying it's not referring when you burn something. When it means a psul happened, it's not referring to the chatas achitzaina that something happened. It means if something happened to the chatas hapnimius. So Amar Loi Chacham is saying. So according to you, that this pasuk about a psul in the chatas hapnimius, that the pasuk is talking about chatas hapnimius. How about the chatas shenichnas dam lefnei lefnim? How about the chatas achitzaina that you brought the blood into the wrong place in lefnei lefnim? How do you know that you burned that? According to Chachamim, he says that's the ikar the pasuk is talking about. But Rabbi Yossi Aglili said it's talking about the chatas hapnimius. So how does Chachamim ask Rabbi Yossi Aglili, how do you know chatas achitzaina that you burn it? So Rabbi Yossi Aglili answered them because it says, "Hein loihuva as dama el kodesh hapnimi." When Aaron, after Nadav Avihu died, so there was a conversation between Moshe and Aaron, because they burnt the Aaron's chatas. So Moshe Rabbeinu says, "Why did you burn it? Hein loihuva as dama el kodesh hapnimi." You didn't bring your chatas hachitzayin, the chatas Aaron inside mechlal. But it's mashma, the nafik if something did happen to it, if there was a psul yaitza on it, or inami ayel dama, or you brought the blood inside, this chatzis of Aaron, which is a chatzis chitzayna, is b'shreifa, that you do burn it. So you see that that according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili, from this pasuk, that a chatzis chitzayna is burnt. And we know there they didn't need ubatsura. There was burning right away. So you see that Rabbi Yossi Aglili says, even though there's like a psul bailim by chatas iron, you learn it out l'dairis, still you don't need ibur tzara. You burn it right away. So that's what Rabbi says. After Rabbi Yossi Aglili, for Rabbi Yechanan, so Rabbi said that even Rabbi Yossi Aglili holds this din. Hi, Rabbi Yochanan said that it was only Rabbi Yochanan ben Baruch and Rabbi Nechemia. Why didn't he also include Rabbi Yosef Glili that you don't need ibut surah by psul bailim? Rabbi Yochanan said, no, dam ubasar chadam milsi. In other words, if there's a psul because of the dam that it was brought in the wrong place, or there was something wrong with the basar, there was a psul yotze, then you're right, you burn it right away. But bailim milsach ritu. If there's a psul bailim, then it's not like something happened to the basar, and therefore you need to batzara according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili. That's why Rabbi Yochanan didn't mention Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Rabbi says that even Rabbi Yossi Aglili includes psul bailim in the same level, and therefore you would burn it without tu batzara. Okay, Mishnah. Hatzamayis va'agidim va'anoiser. You have the bones of a carbon pesach. Now Rashi says that atzmo, the bones of a carbon pesach, you're not allowed to break. There's an isser of breaking the bone of a carbon pesach. Now automatically in a bone you have marrow, and marrow moach is considered basar. So when you have the bone and you can't break it, automatically the moach stays around, so it becomes nicer. Right? Noser behem moach. Noser, therefore v'toran streifa. The bones that has this moach in it, since you can't break it, you have to burn it. V'agidin, and also the gidim are the sinews or the ligaments. So in other words, the Gemara will explain why don't you eat it? Why do you have to burn it? And va noiser, or regular noiser. Rashi says, basar pesach shenis atzlu. You have meat of a carbon pesach that they were lazy b'achilasai, they didn't eat it, and the taistru, and it was left over to the next morning.
Where do they burn it? At home, or do they have to go to the?
No, you burn it wherever you eat it.
Okay. Yeah, well, there's a whole discussion yesterday's more whether we have to. You can tell a person's allowed to burn.
Yeah, but this is your carbon pesach that you're eating at your seder, right?
Right.
You're talking about a.
Also said leftover.
Carbonis. Yeah, of a carbon that you were there, and,
also
right?
I think you said both.
So then you have to burn it in. Okay, but it says Yisrafu. When do you burn it? Bishisha asar. You burn it on the 16th day, because really you're eating the carbon pesach the night of the 15th. So when you wake up the next morning and you still have on the 15th, right? You should burn it then. But since it's Yontif, you can't burn the nights on Yontif. So the Mishnah says you burn it on Chalamoid on the 16th day, the first day of Chalamoid. How about Chal Tazayin Lis b'Shabbos? Let's say the first day Chalamoid, the 16th comes out on Shabbos, so you can't burn the nights then. Yisrafu b'Yitzayin. Why? L'fi she'ein adoichen lo yas Shabbos, but lo yas Yontif. So Omer Rab Mori Baravu Am Rabbi Yitzchak Atzmais Kotshim. Says Shimshu Noiser, bones of Kachim. So in other words, the bones have this marrow in it, right? So Shimshu Noiser. So the bones are basically holding the moach inside. So since the bones by itself, there wouldn't be any marrow, the bones are not roy lachila. But since it has that moach inside, so it becomes like part of the moach, like the basar, and therefore mitames yadayim. There's a din that Nosar, Rashi says that Nosar had Xer of Chachamim that it's matami your hands. So these bones too that have the moach in it, in other words, even though the bone itself is not royal achila, but since it's mishamesh the Nosar, in other words, it's like holding the moach in, so it has the din like the moach, and therefore it will get matamis yadayim hoyel v'nasis basal davar asar. The bones are a base to the moach inside. The moach has a din basar. In other words, once it becomes nicer, it has a din of mitamis yadayim, even the bones. So name him Messiah. I'll bring you a proof from our Mishnah. Because now we're saying that the bones have a din like the moach. And our Mishnah says that it says yisrafu letezayin. You burn it for tezayin. Now, hani atzam is echidami. Our Mishnah that says that you burn the bones, what is it referring? What kind of bones? If there's no marrow in the bones, so lama bisreifa. Why do you have to burn it when it becomes noser? Nishtatu. Just throw it out. Because the whole din of noser is only if there's basar, if it's roy lachila and you left it over. But if bones don't have marrow, it was never roy lachila, so what do you have to burn it? Ela pshita must be when our Mishnah said that you burn the bones of the carbon pesach, the isbei moach, that it does have marrow. Now the Gemara says, if a bone that is working for the moach, that's holding as a base for it, is considered like the basar itself, then lohachi ba'yisreifa. That's why you need to burn the bones, because the bones are considered like the moach, and therefore, just like the moach, you have to burn. So therefore, you burn also the bones. You say shimus noisa lav milsi. If you say that if you're holding you're like the base of the noser, the moach is nothing. So if the bones lamali streifa. Now that it became noser, you have a bone and you have marrow in it. Why do you have to burn the bone? Break the bone, and you could take out the marrow, and burn the moach, because that's basar, and throw out the bones. Why does the Mishnah require to burn the bones? Now the question is, what's wrong? So burn the bones. Why do you have to open it up and just take it the moch? Because Rashi, what's that?
You need more firewood.
Very good. Did you see Rashi? This is on your own. Excellent. That's what Rashi says. Rashi says on the second wide line in Tefu v'nishakul moach, take out the moach v'nishasu v'yafsid eitzim. You don't need a lot of wood. V'toyrach listrav atzamos. When you have bones to burn it, you need a lot of firewood. Just take out the moach, burn it with a little firewood, and throw out the bones. Must be a raya that the bone itself, since it's a shimush of the nicer, has a din like basar, and therefore you have to burn it. That's the raya. Elalav shmamina shimush nicer. The bone that is the base for the moach inside is milsi. That's the raya. So that's the name of Messiah. Amri like laila meibelach shimush nicer lav milsa. It means nothing. In other words, the bone by its, even though it has moach inside, since the bone is not right lachila, it's not considered basar. But the ksavar, boy, bekosher vafilu b'pasol. The din of not breaking a carbon pesach's bones, that din does not only apply to a kosher, even when it becomes pasol. When the bone becomes nicer, still you're not allowed to, there's an ista to break it. So now that you have a bone with moach in it, you cannot break the bone, because there's an isser on it. So therefore you have to burn it because of the moach inside. Right? That's why. You're saying if the bones, the carbon pesach with the bones became puzzle, you're not allowed to break the bones anymore when it became puzzle. But tonight we learned a Mishnah. If somebody leaves over a carbon pesach that is tar, and Rashi says the fourth wide line, the koshkein betame, for sure if the carbon pesach is tameh, the Mishnah says that you don't get malchus. If somebody breaks the bones of a carbon pesach when it becomes puzzle, becomes tameh, right? So there's two ways to becoming puzzle. One way is the nicer way, right? The other way is it becomes tameh. It says ein a seifik zarba. So the first part of the Mishnah is why, if you leave over nicer, don't you get malchus? Because it's a lav and nitik laseh, right? It says leisasir mena biker. So that lav, you would get malchus. But what does it say right afterwards? That's a lav anitik laseh, right? Or some people say it's lav shemei maisa. Whatever it is, that's the reason why you don't get malchus on the noser part. But the shvira says when you break a tameh, you don't get malchus. So you see that if something's puzzle, there's no issur of breaking it, right? So how could you say here, but this bones became nicer, you're not allowed to break it to take the moach out? In other words, we see that a puzzle is okay. So more answers, no, there's a difference if the bones became tameh or the bones became noser, like kasha. Kan shasa la shasa kosher. If it had a shasa kosher, like noser, day one, the first night was kosher, the bones, right? Now, when you wake up in the morning, it's there, it becomes puzzle. So since it had a shasa kosher, that psul that applied when it was kosher, not to break the bone, even applies later on. But kan shasa kosher. By tameh, when it became tameh right away, since it never had a shasa kosher, there's no isser of breaking the bone when it's tameh. So therefore, our case, where there was a shasa kosher, you're not allowed to break it, so therefore you have to burn the bones with the moach with the bones itself. Uman tanale, the shanale, ben shas, shas la shasa kosher, shasa kosher. Who's the tana that makes a difference if it had a shasa kosher is Rabbi Yaakov. Who the Tanya Rabbi Yaakov is the author of this in this brisa. It says the etzem loisishbru bo, the bones of a carbon pesach you're not allowed to break. So the Tanakama explains, bo bekosher, the whole isser of breaking a carbon pesach's bones is only if the carbon pesach is kosher, v'loy bepasul. Rabbi Yaakov Omer, no, hoy shaloi shaza kosher, if it was good, b'nifsal, then even when it becomes pasul, yesh ba mishum shvir zetzem. Hoy shaloi shaza kosher, ein bo mishum shvir zetzem. So you see, Rabbi Yaakov holds that there's a difference if it had a shaza kosher or not. And Rab Shimon Omer, echad zeh v'echad zeh, ein bo mishum shvir zetzem. Doesn't make a difference if it had a shasa kosher or not. If it becomes pasul, there's no isser, right? So, Taisus asks, the Tanakama and Rab Shimon are really saying the same thing, right? If we look at the second last Taisvim, Taimar, Rab Shimon haina Tanakama. The Tanakama says, b'koshev le b'pasul. Rab Shimon says that there's no issa of breaking the bones when it's pasul. Rab Shimon says even when it had a shasa kosher, there's no issa of breaking the bones. Aren't they saying the same thing? Correct? So Taisus answers, Vanillary.
Does Rabbi Yaakov say when there's a shasa kosher, then there is a issa of breaking?
That's Rabbi Yaakov. How about the Tanakama? If you look at the Brisa, there's a Tanakama that it says b'kosher v'lo b'pasul. Rabbi Yaakov makes a difference. Rab Shimon doesn't make a difference. So Rab Shimon is saying exactly what the Tanakama is saying. So what's a three-way machlokes here? So Taisa explains, Vanilla read Rab Yaakov, Rab Shimon, pligi aliv the Tanakama. There's no three-way machlokes here. There's a Tanakama that makes a blank statement. Now Rab Yaakov and Rab Shimon are arguing on what the Tanakama means. Okay? That's just a side thing if you understand the Brisa now a little better. So now the Gemara asks a question back to this shimush noiser, right? If you have the bone that's the base of the noser of the moach, is it milsihi? Is it considered like basar or not? So we said meisvei. Now we're going to ask a question on that concept. It says kol atzmos hakachim, all bones of kachim, not carbon pesach. Any bone ain't tun and streifa. You do not have to burn it. So if it's left over from kachim, you don't burn it. What do you do with the bones? You just break them, take out the moach that was left over of the regular kachim, you burn the moach, and you throw out the bones. Right? But chutz me'atzmos ha'pesach, the bones of a carbon pesach, in other words, that you're not allowed to break. So we say mneat kala of you burn even the bones. It says. Now, Fred the Gemara, hani atzmos hechidami. What kind of bones are these? Elaim b'les by moach. If these bones of the carbon pesach have no marrow in it, lamali streifa. Why do you have to burn it? Just throw it away. Because it's bones. Elipshita must be that these bones is by moach, right? V'isal gedaitach. Shimush naisa milsahu. So if you say that if you're a shimush naisa, if you base the bones that are part of that, right? In other words, Fred the Gemara, atzmos kachim amayin tun and streifa. Why only the atzmos pesach you have to burn? Even the bones of kachim you have to burn. Because even though you're allowed to break it and take the moach out, but the bones at one point in time was a base to the moach. So it gets a din basar. If it has a din basar, you have to burn it. So why does this brisa say kol atzmos hakachim amayin tun and streifa? So it's a raya that shimush naisher is lav milsi. The answer is no. This brisa is talking. Amar Menachem by Yitzchak hachem mayaskinan k'mayin shematzu chalutzin. In other words, you already found the bone all crushed up, right? The moach is out. So now the question is, on this bones, what do you do to the bones? So if it's atzmos kachim, if it's not a carbon pesach, it's a regular carbon, the eibai mishum shvir ze'etzem. So we say kameid and have a nicer, before these bones became nicer, you know what you did? Chaltzinu, the guy must have broken the bones, taken out the moach, right? So these bones were never part of the nicer, right? They were crushed. Therefore, v'lahavishim is nicer. They were never part of the nicer, but they were already broken beforehand, and therefore v'leibayis reifa. That is by a regular carbon. But atzmos pesach diyesh by mishum shvir zetzem. But bones of a carbon pesach, when it's kosher, you're not allowed to break the bones. So it must be that when you were sitting at your seder eating the carbon pesach, those bones cannot be crushed. They can't be broken. So the the bones were together with the moach. The next morning when you woke up and the bone is there, right? It was part of shimush noiser. It had it in basar. So even though you crushed it afterwards and took out the moach, those bones have a shame basar. Therefore you have to burn it, right? Even though now we see it crushed, it must have been broken after it became puzzle, right? So when it became into a shame noiser, it was still part with the moach, right? And therefore you have to burn it.
Even though the moach's gone now.
Well, the moach is now gone because it's already the next day, right? So the noiser kicked in the morning, right?
Yeah.
At that point, when the noiser kicked in, Yontiv in the morning before you went to shul, the bones must have been together with the moach. When you come back from shul, you see, oh, it's all broken up. So it must be somebody broke it then and took the moach out. But those bones got already a shame basar, right? When you woke up in the morning, and therefore you have to burn the bones of a carbon pesach. So therefore, we say again, atzmes haPesach the Yeshba mishum shveres etzem. Why? Because lebas in the heaven nicer hu dechaltzinu. Only when it became noser, yontiv in the morning, it was the moach was taken out. V'havale shimush nicer, and therefore by Yisreifa. Rav Zvita Amar Hachem Hayeskinon Gigayin Shem Matzah Sfurin, where you found a pile of bones, right? Now, when you found a pile of bones on top, umehen chalutzim, on the top of this pile of bones, you found some of them that were already broken, and the moach was taken out. Now, the question is, do you have to check the bottom of the pile to see if they're also broken? So we say, atzmais kachim, if these bones are not of a carbon pesach, are regular carbonis, so therefore we know there's no isser, the einbay mishum shveres etzem, so therefore just like the top is crushed already, the kula avachalzlein, they must be all crushed, and the moach was taken out, or v'achale, and they ate the moach already. So therefore v'loi bois reifo, therefore these bones are just bones, they're not rohi la'achila, you don't have to burn it. But atzmais Pesach, the bones of Pesach, the yesh by mishum shveres etzem, there's an isser, right? Yeah. So even though the bones on top are crushed, maybe the guy only crushed these, but the bottom ones maybe were not crushed. Therefore, by Yisreifa. Look at Rashi. Atzmis kachim le'boy lemivdag tachtoinim. Abel atzamais atzmis pesach boy lemivdag kula, and that's what it says. Ubaha palig Rab Zvit Arav Nachman. The imotzen chalutzen, if they were crushed, maybe if but here it was talking, there was a pile and only the top of the pile you see crushed. Is there a chiyuv to go ahead and check the bottom of the pile? Rav Zvit said there's a chiyuv by a carbon pesach, you better check the bottom to see if they're also crushed. If they're not crushed, you're going to have to burn them. Why don't
we assume that it happened after they become noser, because
there's a lav.
The person is broken before there's chayiv curse. You're not allowed to break a bone.
Right. So these bones that are crushed now after it became noser must have been it happened afterwards.
So then they're a carrier for the marrow, so they should be burned.
That's why you have to burn the carbon. That's why it says the carbon pesach. Look what he says. This atzmais pesach again. The yesh by mishum shveres etzem. So dil mahani lechaltzinu. Maybe these are taken out. Hanach loichaltzinu. Well, therefore by Yisreifa you have to burn it.
But even if he did empty it, didn't make any difference if they were emptied. Well, they're already. No,
the ones that's what Rashi says. Rashi says the imatz, the third line, the imatz and chalutzin. If you found them crushed, loichomer shimush noser kulahai lasricha said misafik. We're not sure, right? Maybe the guy did over. Maybe he was over. Somebody was over and broke the bone. But now the question is there a chiyuv on these bones to burn? Yeah. So that's what Rashi says. If the ones on top that are crushed, then you don't have to burn. But the bottom ones, you're going to have to burn the whole pile, or you have to check them. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, Kol Agidan Basar. All ligaments or sinews are considered basar. Chutz. So therefore, if they're basar, therefore if you have the carbon pesach and the gidin, if somebody eats the gidin and doesn't eat any other basar, your mitzvah of carbon pesach on the gidin. Right, but chutz begida etzavar, but from the neck that is it's hard there. It's like Rashi says, it's eitz ba'almuhu. You cannot be mekayim the mitzvah korban pesach from the gidei. So if you have the gergula, it's the gergul, you can't be yaitza. So for the Gemara now Tanan, according to this, we learned in our Mishnah. It says Atzamois Hagidin Hanoisa Yisru B'Tezayin. It says the gidin that became noser, you burn. For the Gemara Hana gidin, these ligaments hechidami. Ilay megidei basar. If they're considered, if they're good meat on him, so why do you burn him for? Nichalu, why don't you sit down and eat him? Eat it, right? If you even the tosar, so but you're going to say, I can't. You know why we're burning it now? Because it's nicer. So for the Gemara, hana nicer. That's exactly the case of noser. So why did the Mishnah have to say hagidin v'hanosar? If the gidin have a good stick of flesh and they became nicer, that is the category of nicer.
Right.
On the Hatzami's part, Rashi explained, you know why they were mentioned by itself? Because the only reason why you can't eat them is because you can't break it. You can't get into the moach. You're not allowed to break the bone. So therefore it's a special din. But the gidin, if they're basar, they're included in osar. So what's the big chiddush that you're burning it? El pshita must be these gidin, and not gidin basar. They're not the regular gidin that have a good shtickle flesh on it. Must be, it's gidei tzavar. It's from the neck. And what does the Mishnah say? That you burn it. So if we say the neck gidin are considered basar, that's why the Mishnah says, now the guy didn't eat it, because you can't be mekayim the mitzvah of korban pesach with that, because there's nothing really to eat, but you have to burn it. If they're not considered basar, lamli sreifa. According to Rabbi Yehuda Amarav, he just said that gidin tzavar are not considered basar, so what are you burning it for in our Mishnah? The Gemara says,
but if it's basar, then it's nicer.
If it's basar,
then it's the same thing like nicer.
Yeah, but that's the chiddush. That chiddush on the gidin is that even though it's the neck gidin, it's still considered basar. That's why he mentioned it separately. Because I might think, if it wouldn't say that, I would say just regular gidin that are real fat, have good meat. But a gidin tzavar, that you can't really get a lot of meat, I might think that it's not basar. Therefore, the Mishnah mentioned that's also considered. That's a chiddush. Right? So more answer leinein Amar of Chizlei Nitzrucha, our Mishnah. So really, gidei of the neck is not basar, right? Other gidim are basar, and therefore rayla and therefore they're regular basar, and they come into the din of nicer like a regular piece of meat. So why does the Mishnah specify gidin? It's talking about the gid hanasha, v'alibra Rabbi Yehuda. According to Rabbi Yehuda, that the gid hanasha is only noyek by one, right? The Tanya, we learned the Bryce, Rabbi Yehuda, the Issa gid hanasha only applies, there are two gid hanashas. There's the right side and the left side. So Rabbi Yehuda says that it's only noyek by one of them, the Issa. And the Bryce says there that my mind would push me towards the right one. Now, if you look at Rashi says in Chulin, there's a shaila what Rabbi Yehuda means. In other words, there's a shaila if in Das Torah, the Torah really says it only applies to the right, not to the left, or we're not sure. We're not sure, does it to the right or the left? Hadaz machraz means we come along and say it means the right. So the Gemara says, if that's the problem, tifshot. In our Mishnah, we should bring a raya to Svuki Misap Gilei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda is not sure if it's the right or the left. We just come along with it as machraz. The mifsha pshitale. If we know for sure that the Torah says the right one is the Isser, the left is not. Hayde Torah. So the left one is mutter. So why nichlu? Why can't we eat it? With the Yisura and the right one, just nishtaro, throw it away. What do you have to burn it for? Lamali Shreifa. Must be that we hold in our Mishnah that we're not sure if it's the right or the left. If we're not sure, we don't eat both of them. So therefore you have to burn it. So Gemara says, no. Amrav ikar b'achirina kigoyin shehukral b'sayim nizavra. Really we know that the one that's Aser Minat Torah is the right, not the left. So what do we ask? If we know that the left is mutter, why don't you just eat the left? The problem was here that they got mixed up. The right and the left were taken out, and then they both got mixed up, and now we don't know which is which. So therefore, that's why the Mishnah says that you burn it. Rav Ashi says, it's talking about the fat of the Gid HaNasha. So even though the Gid HaNasha is also Minat Torah to eat, but Minat Torah you are allowed to eat the fat of it. In other words, only the Chacham came along and made an Isser. Like Nisrachal L'Shamna the Gid HaNasha, the Tanya Shamna Mutter, Minat Torah the fat of the Gid HaNasha is Mutter, V'Yisrael Kedoshimim, V'Nagibem Isser. So when our Mishnah says that you're burning the Gid, it's talking about the fat of the Gid HaNasha. Right? So therefore, if you look at Rashi, Rav Ashi Amar, Masnisin, the third, not the wide line, the middle of wide lines, Masnisin b'shomno shel gid kamar, the mutter ben ha-Torah, v'noag by Isser, hilkach tchilasai l'sreifa. Right away, you can never eat it, it gets burned. But kiven the ben ha-Torah mutter, so therefore chal Isser naisa alav. So Rashi asks a question. So why do you have to specify gid by itself? Why it's included in when the Mishnah says no, sir. But Rashi says it's not included under the category of regular noiser because the high al korcha mitichalasi lekachome. In other words, the Chachamim force you not to eat it. Regular noiser means you're supposed to eat it. You got lazy, you didn't eat it. So it gets nicer, you have to burn it. But this gid, even though you were forced not to eat it, right? Because Yisrael Nagabim Isser, still you have to burn it. That's why the Itzrach lemisnei bapi nafshe. Therefore, the Mishnah had to list it by itself. Ulashminan the Asar la'achla. Ravina Amar, this Gidon is talking bechitzon on the outer Gid of the Gid HaNasha. Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, the Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Beis Gidon name. There are two Gidon. The Pnimi Hasamach Le'etzem. The Pnimi, the one that's wrapped around the bone, that's Aser. V'chayavim alav. But Chitzon Hasamach Le'basar, Aser, you can't eat it, but Ein Chayavim alav. So we're talking about, when we're saying that you're burning it, we're talking about the outer one. Okay. Then the Mishnah says, Chal Tezayin. So the Mishnah said, and a Mishnah means you have nicer. You're supposed to eat the carbon Pesach at your Seder. The next morning, you didn't eat it. You woke up, there's stuff left over, so you're supposed to burn it. And our Mishnah says you can't burn it because it's Yontif. You have to wait till the first day, Chalamayit, to burn it. For the Gemara, why can't you burn it Yontif morning? Nesa say, why does not say of burning based to Srofu, V'yitchalaisa, let it be Docha, the lav of Yantiv. So why didn't you burn it? So Amachizkiya, because you have a special pasuk. V'chein tani bechizkiya Amakra leisesur menat boker v'anosu menat boker be'eish tisrafu shein tam leima boker. Why does the Torah have to say at boker again? When it says again at boker, it's saying not the first morning. In other words, you have to burn it. The asay, when the Torah says burn it, is actually referring to the second morning. So normally asay is doichelaisa asay, but our asay is not referring to Yontif first morning. It means the second morning. So you have a special pasuk that you cannot burn it on Yontif. Aryai says another pasuk. He says, "Amakra, oila Shabbos b'Shabbatoi, oilas chayil b'Shabbos, oilas chayil b'Yontiv." It says that you can only bring an oila that belongs to Shabbos, but you can't bring a weekday oila on Shabbos, no weekday oila on Yontiv. Now we know the Korban Pesach is considered a weekday. Why? Because when do you zayrik the dam of a Korban Pesach? On the 14th day. 14th day is not Oilas Shabbos. It's not Oilas Yontif. It's a weekday one. So therefore, you cannot burn it on when it comes nice. You cannot burn it on Yontif. You have to wait for Chalamoid. Rava Amar Omakra Hu Levada Yosei Lachem. Who, in other words, whatever you do, in other words, but V'loi Machshirai, and so therefore you cannot do the Machshirim on Yontif. In other words, levadai v'loy mila shaloi bizmanoi haba b'kal v'chomer. And in other words, and also the Torah says that you have a milah shlei b'zmanoi. It's not the 8th day. The baby wasn't well, so therefore it's not the 8th day. All of a sudden now Shabbos comes along, Yom Tov comes along, and you want that baby's healthy, and let's say it's the 9th day, right? The 10th day. You want to do the milah. You're not allowed to do it, and you need a pasuk to tell you, because without the pasuk, haba b'kal v'chomer. Without the pasuk, I would make a kal v'chomer to say that it is allowed. So therefore, the pasuk says that you cannot do it. Rav Ashi Amar, how do you know that you cannot burn? In other words, the nicer on Yontiv, because Shabbosan, the Yontiv, the Shabbosan of Yontiv is a asehu, and it's an aseh. So therefore, now normally you say aseh deichilas aseh, but now Yontiv, not only is it a lav, it's also an aseh. So now you only have aseh against a lav lois aseh, and the din is asehu ve'ed aseh deichilas aseh ve'aseh. Anyway, have a good day. Shkoyach.